I was a single mother. Unemployed, depressed, and barely able to pay my bills and buy food for my daughter. Now I am one of the most successful and richest women in the world, even though I lost my billionaire status by donating a lot of money to charities. I was named most influential woman in Britain and came up with a story that is now worth $25 billion. I was born on July 31, 1965 in Yate, Gloucestershire, England. My father was a flight engineer and my mother a research assistant. I loved collecting stories and was a real bookworm. My favorite book was, and is the biography of Jessica Mitford. While other children were playing sports, went shopping or watched a movie, I stayed home alone and read everything I could find on Mitford. She became my hero, someone who always followed her heart no matter what happened. As far as I can remember, there was nothing I loved more than writing. The title of my first book was Rabbit, that I wrote when I was 6 years old. I loved telling my made-up stories to my sister, stories involving fantasy with normal everyday things. Primary school did not interest me and was very strict. Writing allowed me to escape reality, but it could not prevent disaster from striking when my mother was diagnosed with an aggressive form of MS. MS is a neurological disease affecting the central nervous system and can cause problems with walking, feel, and see. Up to the present day, this disease is still not curable. I felt helpless. I believed if I had my dream to become a writer, that my other dreams would also come true and my mother would be well again. And so I kept writing, hoping it would help to contain her illness. I really wanted to go to the University of Oxford, but when I was rejected, I was able to go to the University of Exeter. After graduating, I had some temporary jobs, but I kept writing because I believed in a future career as an author. I had the ambition to be a writer, but honestly I felt more like a bum. All I had was 2 novels which would not be published. Family and friends worried and tried to convince me to give up writing and focus on a real job because there was no money to be made writing. I doubted. But out of nowhere, like a bolt of lightning, during a horrible train journey from Manchester to London, there was the idea for a miraculous story of a young boy at a wizarding school. However, before I finished the 4th chapter of the book, my mother passed away. If I regret something, then it is that I never told my mother about this story because I was afraid what she would think. I was devastated by her passing and left for Portugal for a while to teach English. I thought this was what my life would look like. Actually, I was quite happy and luck was on my side. I fell in love. We got married 3 years later, and not long after, our daughter Jessica was born, named after my favorite author Jessica Mitford. Unfortunately, our marriage didn't last, and 4 months after Jessica's birth I divorced her father. I didn't know what to do and where to go. I felt displaced and decided to go back to Edinburgh. My marriage failed. I was a single mother without a home and without money. I felt like a failure and thought other people saw and pointed to me that way too. It wasn't long before I had a crippling, cold and unhappy flow. I ended up in a depression. I was afraid of what to do with my daughter and with me. I was exhausted and saw no way out for us, was lived by fear and the criticism of people around me. I sank deeper into my feeling of powerlessness, didn't like life anymore, and wondered if it was worth it to go on. It's that I had Jessica, otherwise things could have ended differently for me. I would never leave her alone. For my ongoing depression, I regularly visited a clinic. After several treatments, I began to realize that I not only had a daughter to fight for, but also a book. Still homeless and without a decent typewriter, I turned a manuscript into a full book. I was relieved to send the story to 12 publishers, but was rejected one by all again. It felt like a total failure, and I began to see that a career as a writer was out of the question for me. Reluctantly, I accepted a job as a teacher. It was hard to keep afloat. I barely had enough money to support Jessica. Suddenly, as if by magic, I was approached by Bloomsbury Publishers for a book I had sent them a year earlier. I could not believe it. My imagination ran away with me. Would I still become a writer? The publisher advised me to keep my job as a teacher because apparently there was little to earn from writing children's books. But none of that mattered to me. For the first time, I felt that something new was about to happen. Shortly afterwards, the Scottish Arts Council granted me an amount of £8,000, the first instance that encouraged me to continue as a writer. Finally, I felt that everything was starting to fall into place. In June 1997 became the book I had been working on for 7 years, published in an edition of 1,000. Most were sold to libraries, but I was very happy with it. To my surprise, won the book about a wizard boy. My book dash. The Nestle Smarties Book Prize. And 3 months later it won the prize for Best Children's Book of the Year in England. The rights to the book were purchased by Scholastic Incorporated, the largest publisher in England. I was overwhelmed with emotions when I heard this news and wanted nothing more than my mother could have been with me right now. For me, this was the sign to me full-time to write more books. Thanks to the good reception of my first book and the rapidly growing fan club, I wrote 3 follow-up books in 3 years about Harry Potter and the Philosopher's Stone. This was followed by 3 more bestsellers and more prizes. The 7th and final Harry Potter book came out on July 21, 2007. Although the series of stories about a boy who attended a wizarding school came to an end, it had become a worldwide success with translations in 65 languages and a value of $15 billion. The 8 movies made about the adventures of Harry Potter have made me the richest author in the world. But I never forgot the obstacles I've had to overcome to get to this point. In memory of my dear mother, I donated money for the construction of a new center for regenerative medicine at the University of Edinburgh, and a large part of my wealth I used to support people who, like me, once needed help. I no longer have to worry whether I can pay my bills, and I don't have to apologize to others anymore either that I followed my childhood dream. I may be one of the world's highest earning authors, but, just like Harry Potter, is a happy life with friends and family the only thing that really matters. Sometimes things in life don't go the way you want them to. Sometimes you have to deal with setbacks, or are you so deep in the pit that you wonder if you still get it? Life is a moving train without knowing exactly where it is going, but as long as you keep believing in yourself and not give up, you always arrive at your destination. I was never able to tell my mother that I became a writer. And I never got to share my stories with her, but I'm sure she's my biggest fan. My name is Joanne Rowling, better known as J.K. Rowling.